thank you for all the wonderful comments and replies and everything that I received in the previous video. I actually had enough questions and enough requests pertaining to see if I could make a more viable and safer stacking process that's both easier and can be utilized in the faster paced games of high MMR pubs and theoretically even in professional matches. So basically I'll go ahead and explain how this is happening. Ahead of time, I'll let you know just a little bit about how this game was going. I told my teammates before the game even started that I was thinking about theoretically stacking for them if they did want to pick some stacking here or some heroes that can take stacks very easily. And my Luna said that she actually would prefer if I could go to do the stacking earlier on because in this particular game we were playing against a Viper and an Earthshaker, or you can't see the Earthshaker, he's off screen at the moment, but it was kind of an aggressive lane. They were diving a little bit, but then they were pulling back the opposite way. I made sure to block their camp beforehand to try to make it so that waves would come towards us instead, so we'd be safer under the tower instead of exposed to where the Earthshaker could actually block my Luna on the other side with the Viper's Nether Toxin, and then he would just poison attack her to death. So any way I could make it possible to bring creeps towards our tower would actually be more advantageous in this particular lineup. And so since I let her know ahead of time that I was theoretically thinking about stacking in this game, she said, okay, go ahead and do that because we're probably going to have to recover as much as possible. And then on top of that, she wants to get as many levels as possible. So the more time I spend away from this area, but close enough to try to save her if need be, she would get the bonus experience. And then on top of that, she would get the money from the stacks as well. So I'm going to go ahead and play the clip. And we're going to see what I do in this particular case. So you'd notice that it's a minute and 22 seconds into this game, making sure to ward to see if I can actually stack my camps instead of having Earthshaker come to block it. He comes to block the area that I'm at. But the thing is, he sees that I run up the cliff, right? So the thing that this guy is thinking about is basically he's like, I need to get into this area to make sure that he can't pull this camp to stack it at the minute mark, and so that there's a double set of neutral creeps that can come out and kill whichever wave is going to be coming this way, right? So basically his way of thinking is, oh, I need to get over there and make it so that he can't do his job, right? Because if that's the case, then our waves are going to be pushing out as Viper's trying to deny, and then Luna's going to have to run further into the lane. But the thing is, he doesn't realize that I can actually stack this from the backside, right? So basically what I'm going to do is make sure that anytime it gets to a minute and 30 seconds into the game, if I am planning on doing the stacking strategy, which I think, I mean, it makes sense in a lot of games if you are playing Shadow Demon to try to do this, but especially make sure to let your carry know ahead of time so he knows to play defensively, right, on Luna. And he even told me this ahead of time that he'll try to watch himself and make sure he doesn't overextend. And so I come over here at 1 minute and 30 seconds into the game. And I want to make sure that I can stack all these camps for both my carry and my mid laner, if possible. And so I'm going to go down a list of the advantages of doing this. So this is the 5-stack strategy instead of 6-stack. If you've seen my previous video, I did 6 stacks, and it requires you to be level 7, right? So if you're playing Shadow Demon in that game, you'd have to have your disruption maxed out in order to do it, whereas you'd only need 1 level of Shadow Poison. But here are the list. This is a list of the advantages of doing a 5-stack instead, which you can do a 5-stack on Shadow Demon at level 1, which is crazy. It's crazy how much that can benefit your team, as long as they're the ones to focus on taking the stacks, right? So if an enemy team sees this ahead of time, the advantage that they would probably have is to try to block camps from you so that you can't do this. Either that, or they would have to try to inform their teammates, like Earthshaker would have to do once he realizes what's happening, is to try to get in your jungle. But if they don't know it ahead of time, then like you can take advantage of this. And even still to the same point, you can protect your own jungle a lot more easily than they can attacking it, because they're very out far in range coming into your side of the map this early on. So theoretically, I could have more ganks coming in both through the outpost or mid lane or even the safe lane towers to come to this area, whereas they're overextending from their side to get all the way over here. So here are the list of advantages that I can let you know ahead of time. So as far as the level 1 5 stacking, it does not require boots. So if you notice my items right now, I actually don't have a pair of boots here. The reason for this is because you're stacking each of these camps with a Shadow Poison and you have to time them correctly, and actually the movement speed of Shadow Demon is enough at the beginning of the game to be able to go in between all of these 5 camps over here without actually needing boots, right? And if you do have boots, it actually makes it easier because, later on, it'll make it easier because you get set up in the spot that you need to be at by a particular time faster, right? So theoretically, as long as you're paying attention to the clock, that's all that should matter. It's not so much based on like your movement speed to get to one area and then just shooting immediately as soon as you have it. Just watch the clock. So then the next thing, other than not requiring boots, is that there's no wards technically needed to do this, right? Because in the previous clip, if you remember how I did the disruptions before, you had to have a ward in this spot. And I tend to have wards in this area anyway, just in case. But you'd have to have the disruption there in order to attack or use each of your illusions to attack both of these camps simultaneously and then pull them to the side, right? And I know that there's quite a few people that were asking questions about, well, is the ward actually necessary or not? I think that it's much safer to be able to use it that way, because if you were to use attack commands on the ground within the area of each of these neutral camps, it would take too long for the unit to be able to travel to that exact spot and then start attacking to pull them back, right? Because considering Shadow Demon is a ranged character, his illusions will be ranged and they can attack further away to pull them at a faster rate. And it also depends, too, on the movement speed of the neutrals that you have in the small camp for the 6-stack, right? So the 6-stack, I will say, is more so a flashy play. I don't do it as much in my games. I only do it if you're really far ahead and it's more of like a meme, I guess is how I would describe it. Whereas the 5-stack is actually a viable way of doing this, because 6-stack requires you to be level 7 on Shadow Demon, and you have to be on this side of the map for like a given period of time, microing your units to go do this. Whereas the 5-stack, it only requires level 1. You do not need the wards because all you're doing is shooting the shadow waves. So you don't actually need to see any of these camps when you're shooting them. Although it is a benefit to know that the enemy team isn't going to be coming into the area to try to block the stacks or take the farm, right? But then on top of this, you're going to be stacking a safe lane anyway. So this small camp right here, usually if you're position 5, you're going to be stacking this camp, because you want to make it so that if this wave, as I had mentioned before, this wave pushes out, if they start pulling back, if this wasn't blocked, they could theoretically start pulling the wave back or denying early, right? So then Luna gets caught off guard because she's going to have to go all the way down here, and she's going to have to try to farm this or stand a little bit farther back. And Earthshaker is going to abuse that, right? Because he's going to stand in the trees on this side and then try to block her from getting out of there. And then immediately afterwards, Viper's just going to run her down with all the poison that he has, right, to slow her. And so it's going to be a terrible cancerous lane for her. So the advantage of doing this is you stack this camp to pull these creeps when they're coming down and deny the full wave, so that if they ever try to pull their wave back, it has to push because there's no creeps that are going to meet them in the lane further down, right? And especially so if this is already blocked, which eventually Earthshaker will unblock this, but he doesn't realize this for the first few minutes of the game. So it's an advantage in our particular case, because this means that Luna is also getting the bonus tower protection of the 3 armor and health regeneration by 1. And I can TP to this tower. If I need to save her at a last second call, like, I can get there in time to do it. And theoretically, these people, the Viper or the Earthshaker, if they're diving under the tower, they could get caught off guard, because that means that they're overextending and the tower will be attacking them during it, right? So that's turning the tides in our advantage if this is the case, if the waves are being pulled towards our tower, especially if she has enough damage to take care of the units by last hitting, even if it's under tower, which she does. So as long as she's playing a character, or as long as the carry in general is playing a character that is relatively self-sustaining, has enough armor or health to be able to survive hits if they are trying to take the creeps in lane, has preferentially, it doesn't have to be ranged attacks, but some form of getting last hits that is from range. Because if they're pulling these waves back still, and this is just at the beginning of the game, the carry who's in this lane wants to have at least some form of being able to snipe the units from further away, even if it's costing them a little bit, because eventually the creeps will come back under their own tower, right? So I would never recommend to do this if you have a core or a carry in particular that that is playing someone that really needs to be babysat, like just constantly. So an example of this that comes to mind in a game that I actually saw someone trying to do something like this before, when I was playing position 4. So I wasn't even in this lane. Technically I wasn't on the dire side. I was on the radiant side as position 4, seeing this happen. Where this position 5 against us was stacking this camp and pulling waves or whatever, and their anti-mage is suffering because we start pulling our lane, right? Anti-mage can't come over to try to farm the camps when they're further down because we can abuse that. Even if he blinks out, he's wasting his mana and he's not getting last hits, right? And he has no form of ranged ability to be able to take units when they're further in the lane, like a PA maybe would. And I mean, PA is not the greatest example, but at least she has a dagger to shoot to try to get last hits to get the final blow to get the money from it, right? So even though it's not a great hero for the lane, it somewhat works. Whereas anti-mage has no ability to do something like that. So it depends on which carries in this lane. You'd want one that is relatively self-sustaining, preferentially has high damage to be able to attack under tower to get the last hits. Can survive, and then maybe have some long-range nuke of some sort to confirm last hits if it's from a range, if the lane is starting to get pulled at the beginning. If Earthshaker would have noticed to deward this earlier on, then I would say that's when it's most necessary, because Luna can technically use, even though she wouldn't want to, she could use her Lucent Beam from a range to get it. Say like on a range creep or something like that if they're trying to deny. So, and then to bring it back over here, so I'll keep explaining my own case over here. So first off, you don't need boots, no wards needed, even though I would say it's recommended to know whether or not they're going to try to block your camp. You're going to be stacking the safe lane anyways, because you want to make sure that there's 2 waves here, or 2 neutral camps on the same spot, so that you can pull it and deny the full wave, so that the creep equilibrium comes back up towards the tower, right? And then on top of this, all of these camps in this particular video are further back than the 6 stack. So considering the 6 stack is like a really risky play, and I think it's more just for like the meme of it where it's like, oh, check out this cool thing that someone can do. This is way more viable because you're not stacking this camp that the opponents can use to win the lane, right? Because then they could just destroy all of their own creeps with this double stacked camp. And so the advantages of this is you want to block this camp intentionally so that they can't do that in the first place. And then they actually have to travel quite a distance to see if they can get any of the stacks on the backside, right? So you would know ahead of time, as long as you have some form of wards within the area. It doesn't matter exactly where it is, but you would know beforehand. And so the further back on your side of the map, if you look at the map, the closer it is to your base, the safer it is to get that farm. Because theoretically, even if they do win fights, they would have to come up into your jungle to take care of it. And if they were overextended coming into this area, it would take your team far less time to get there to defend those points early on in the game, because they can TP to all these towers to protect it, right? So the further back it is, the better, because it's safer for you all overall. And then, I mean, as I had mentioned multiple times, it only requires you to be level 1 to do this stack. And then on top of all of this other stuff, this strategy requires no microing, none. So it's super easy for anyone to do. It doesn't matter what your rank is or anything like that, right? So because it's not going to require any advanced mechanics, you just have to know the timings for each of these things. So regardless of what your MMR is, even if you're in a low MMR pub, you can do this, right? You just have to practice maybe a little bit. I mean, it doesn't take too long to be able to know. You just have to know the positionings or the relative positionings, watching your shadow poison, and watching the timing. That's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this clip and show you what exactly is going on during this. So we're going to watch this from my player perspective, and here we go. So I'm checking out the ability right now. You see that I put my cursor over it. You can see the exact range I'm putting it on the perimeter. And I'm going to shoot this. You can either shoot this at 44 or 45, right? That one's relatively easy to get. This is at 48, so you move back a little bit. You shoot that at 48. This is at 51 down that way. And this will be at 54, 55 across. Then I walk over this direction afterwards. And all 5 of these camps should stack at the same time, right? And so I'm back in lane already. So this is about the same amount of time it would have taken me anyway to stack this small camp before this point in time. So again, what I'll reiterate is that if you're position 5, you should be stacking this camp anyway, just to help out with the creep equilibrium in lane. And so all it takes is probably about a difference of 15 seconds for you to get back over here and then stand in the particular spot where you can see the range of your abilities to make sure that it's going to shoot far enough to do it, right? And and another thing that I will mention too that I didn't properly explain in the previous video is that Shadow Poison has, if you read the ability, it'll aggravate the creeps or the neutrals originally at the 10, like it's after you shoot it. So it takes 1.5 seconds for this to reach whatever wave you're shooting it to, if it's the full range, right? And so the reason why I'm shooting this camp up here at a minute and 44 or a minute and 45 seconds, and theoretically you could even do this at a minute and 43 seconds, is that from this point it'll take a second and a half to get there, right? So it would be, say if I were to shoot it at a minute and 43 and a half seconds, it would reach here at a minute and 45. And so after that, if you read the rest of this description, it says debuff duration is 10 seconds, right? So effectively what that means is that it will proc another instance of damage after 10 seconds. So when you're shooting it, if you were to shoot it at 143 and a half seconds, it would reach here at 145. And then after that point in time, 10 seconds later, another instance of damage would be applied at 155. So if you see the camp and the timing for stacks, it will be able to pull this out after the second instance of damage applies and drag these units down this way, right? Whereas the rest of the camps that you're attacking, you don't need to rely on your Shadow Poison's release or the activation afterwards to stack the camp, right? So when I come back over this way, if I were to shoot it and I'm standing about here to get that camp at the beginning, I would take a few steps back after I shot it and stand right here, and then shoot this camp, this neutral camp over here at about 148. And so it doesn't rely on the second activation. This will hit it, and these neutrals will follow you all the way up to like about here or so. And it takes them too long to be able to get back after that point in time to like block the camp from stacking again. And the one thing that I will say is that if you were to do this repeatedly, the small camp is always going to be the one that's the hardest to stack, because there's such a big range in the movement speed of the units, right? So you have things like the harpies and the kobolds are typically an easier thing to stack because they have the movement speed. The only issue is the number of units that are in that camp at that particular point in time. So if you have a lot of small units in there, it's going to be much harder, as you can tell, the higher number of stacks you have, it's going to be harder because they're going to be blocking each other and they can't get out all at the same time. Whereas if you do have some of these, if you get lucky and have kobolds that come with other things that are slower units, they actually do give the bonus movement speed to all of the units that are in there. So the most unlucky that you can get would be having the neutrals that have like the frost movement, as well as the null, the little null spear guys. Those guys, all of them are relatively slow. But the thing is, the advantage by difference in this case, as opposed to 6-stack, is the fact that they won't slow down the movement speed of your illusions like they did in the last clip that I made for everybody. In this one, it's solely dependent upon when your Shadow Poison reaches them. So they're already going to be moving on their own. It doesn't require you to micro your illusion away that's slowed down and then they're all attacking that, right? So it should work multiple times, but you have to start moving the seconds ahead of time, and I'll explain that in a second. So after I came over here, shoot that one at 148, I start walking down over this way, and then when I get about here or so, I shoot a wave down here, and you've already seen these before, but that was the 151, and then I come over this way and shoot across, and that's like 154, 155, and that hits all of these, and then you run back. So as you're running back, you're basically already going to be back towards the lane. So the advantage would be all of the stacking that you're doing. And so I think that the only thing that you should keep in mind that might be difficult to understand or conceptualize for stacking in the future, and this is something that usually it takes I would say lower MMR pubs a while to understand multiple stacking, and you don't necessarily have to do this multiple times. I think that it's a good thing if you do it multiple times. In a lot of cases, if you do have some form of wave clear for your cores to be able to take out a bunch of units at the same time, but don't overstack things, because theoretically you could be killing your own teammates if you have way too many stacks in there, which is possible if they don't have the ability to defend themselves as they're taking it. And so another thing that I mentioned is that Luna is smart enough to realize that she needs some form of vampiric attack, so she actually ends up getting a morbid mask and turns it into a mom later on, so that she can come back over here and farm all these camps and do it safely, because she's sustaining her health up high, right, while doing it. And it's pretty fast because it gives her attack speed too. So it really helps with taking out stacks. But as far as multiple stackings are concerned, if you do want to do that and come back later on, you'd have to recognize what times you're doing each of these polls at. And so say you're coming to do this camp over here again, and you have multiple stacks already in there, you're going to have to start switching the timings to be a little bit earlier. So the latest that I believe you can do this one at is if you shoot your Shadow Wave Poison at 1:45 or whatever the minute is in the game. It'll be at the 45 seconds of that minute to shoot across from your full extension, right? And so that would mean that it's hitting the units over here at about 47 seconds or so. And then 10 seconds later, it would apply the debuff, and then they would come out at 57, right? And so if you were doing this, you could not do it that late in time to hit this camp first. You'd actually have to start it at a sooner time. So part of the reason why I was saying that you can do it at 1:44 instead is because the time is going to be moving forward anyway. So if you have multiple stacks, you could do it at 1:44, and then eventually it'll come to the point where you almost have to do it at 1:43 instead, because there's so many units blocking each other that they can barely get out. So they just barely make it out of this little box that's right there. And then on top of that, when you're shooting that, say if you're shooting at that at 1:43 or 1:44, realize that this camp over here is at 1:48, right? And so that's the original time for when you would be shooting that. Instead, if there's more and more units in here, you'd have to start shooting that at about 1:47, maybe even 1:46, but I believe 1:47 usually works the best for this one if there are multiple stacks, because by that point in time, you most likely already have the speed aura from the main kobold that would help all the other units run faster, right? And so after that point in time, you come back down this way, and then if this camp is already stacked a few times, instead of doing it at 1:51, you do it at 1:50 instead, and then come across over here and shoot your wave as soon as you get it back up. So that would be about 1:53 maybe instead. And so basically the order of these, all you have to know is the original numbers, which are about 1:45, 1:48, 1:51, and 1:54. About those, it's pretty on par with that. And then as they start multiple stacking, or like there's multiple stacks already there, you just have to start moving that forward in the time period that you'd have to be shooting them, right? So everything is just shifting over a second forward instead, because you need that little extra help to be able to get all of those units out at once. So then on top of this, the only other thing that I can recommend in this video right now, and I promise you that I will be making a video here in the next day or two if I can, talking about stacking all these other camps, like in the triangle, because I think that there's something to be said about how viable it is to be stacking this side of the jungle. Say that your team is applying enough pressure in other areas via characters like Nature's Prophet, which he was actually a really big help in this game. This guy did really well. Because he was applying pressure so that my teammates who fell behind in other lanes, like Enigma and Magnus, and I mean I can't say that Luna did, because we were already doing really well. We ended up getting first blood and got 2 kills right off the bat afterwards after I stacked all these camps, so that went pretty well. But for all these other people who didn't do nearly as well, they can fall back to take the camps over here if I come over here to stack these camps simultaneously, as long as lanes are being forced out, right? So I'm not going to be stacking if I see the enemy team coming into my base, right? Because that would be stupid. They're just going to come over and clear those stacks and take that. So my advice to people who are stacking is realize the potential for the enemy team to raid the areas that you've already stacked or that you're thinking about stacking beforehand, because you don't want to stack for them to come in and then double their numbers and net worth and then just shove down towers into your base, because you could lose this game very easily by doing stuff like that. And so one of the things that I realized in that after I posted the previous Reddit video and the video that I made on YouTube before this one is that people, I mean, jokingly they were saying it, but I think that there's some truth in it, that they're worried about their supports doing this because theoretically the enemy team could show up. Say they have like an alchemist, just catastrophic. That would be real bad. They have an alchemist mid or something like that, and then their team wins a team fight and they take down tier 1 or something like that, and then they come over here and they're like, holy crap, they have a 5 stack right here, and there's a 4 stack right here, and there's another 5 stack right here, and oh my god, we're just gonna have a stinking field day. And so they just run in here and Alchemist starts farming the crap out of everything in each of these camps. Well, good luck to your team after that point in time, because he's gonna be freaking finishing a Radiance about, I don't know, well beyond the point where he would be doing it otherwise. So to bring it back to the point that I was saying is that be careful if you're at lower MMRs or like in an MMR pub of the opponent team trying to take advantage of the fact that you're stacking by invading your camps, right? You want to make sure that they're protected enough to the point where you can see people coming ahead of time and know to transition over to this area. And don't be afraid to talk to each of your cores, right? So your position 5, I think that a common thread that I've noticed with a lot of position 5s in games is that they complain because their cores are not either farming their camps or their cores are not helping them out, right? And they're just like, well, what the heck? How am I supposed to advance an MMR if my cores never help me out? They're just so dumb that they go in lane and then they feed and they do all these stupid things. Well, think about it this way. Even if they are feeding, you're technically giving them enough money to be able to come back into the game and enough levels to be able to do something, right? And so on top of that, the best thing that you can do for your team as a position 5 is inform them that you're going to go stack, and then let them know ahead of time, and then let them know what the enemy team is doing during these times, right? Because you have downtime as you're walking over here. So you are literally the game master. You can watch all the different lanes as you're doing this on your map and say, oh, hey, I just saw Puck leave mid. He might be going bottom. I don't know. I just saw him pick up a rune over here or something like that. He's going to be going over that way. So you might want to watch out. Back up a little bit, and then maybe if one of you guys can't stay in lane, you can come over here and farm my stacks. Or on the other side, say that they're coming into the jungle after I've talked to my carry, and say that I've informed them I'm going to go stack, so you need to be safe, right? Theoretically, the enemy team might know that you're stacking, right? So like they're like, oh, the Shadow Demon's been gone for a really long time, so we need to go figure this out. And then they bring in 3 people over here, and they're like, ooh, check out the money. Let's go get some of those neutral camps, right? That's when you're like shouting red alert to your teammates and say, guys, I need you to get over here quick. We might be able to form a gank on these people if we all come at the same time and we teleport into these towers that are nearby, right? So tier 1s, tier 2s, or even mid, or even the outpost at that point in time. Because if you're playing your Shadow Demon correctly, you should have enough ability to know ahead of time who's going to be where on your map just by looking, as well as placing wards in strategic places to see if they're coming your way, right? So you should be able to alert your teammates that they're coming and be able to do something about it, or even just try to alert them to say, hey, I think I need you guys to clear these camps over here, because the enemy team might end up doing it. They might end up smoking or going invis or blinking in or something like that to come try to take these camps beforehand. So I think that the biggest advantage that you can have within this role is the fact that you're literally the person who can see everybody in the map at this point in the game, because it's too early on for people to want to leave lanes, right? Since it's literally only 2 minutes into the game. And so that being said, you should be able to be the one to call shots for your teammates to let them know what you think is most valuable at that particular point in time, and say, hey, like, this is my recommendation. And I wouldn't say force your opinion on anybody. I wouldn't say, oh, you stupid player, why are you not farming my camps or anything like that? Because honestly, who does that benefit? I feel like a lot of people tend to go rage mode in games where they shouldn't be. You should just try to give polite suggestions and keep it PMA, positive mental attitude, And maybe if you give suggestions to say, hey, I got tons of money for you guys, you should come over and farm all these stacks that I'm making for you, they're going to be like, oh, that sounds great to me. And then pretty soon after they're starting to clear those camps, you're going to hear the ka-ching, ka-ching sound over and over. And that's when you start making your money too as a support, which will feel pretty good once you end up getting later on to the game, especially with winning your lanes and stuff like that when you come back afterwards. So to show you just a quick little summary of how little I missed the laning period is I come back over this way. Earthshaker is just wasting his time, so this basically makes it so Luna is just 1v1ing the Viper, which is actually better for her if she's under tower, because it means that he's not a threat to her because he can't wall Luna in, right? So he's just messing around with me, which is just like, okay, well, that's fine with me because I'm just walking away anyway. It doesn't matter to me because he didn't block the stacks, right? Which is what a good player might have realized ahead of time. I mean, this isn't anything to say against Earthshaker. He just didn't realize what was happening beforehand, and so that means that I have the advantage of being able to stack these camps from the backside where he didn't notice that was going to be the case. And so I'll fast forward a little bit here to show you that I'm back in lane. And then when I come back over this way, this dude tries to chase me. I take advantage of the fact that he's trying to block the camp, and he's tanking these neutrals a little bit, right? And so the more he tanks, I can get some right clicks on too. And even if he right clicks me, it'll actually be advantageous for me in the long run because I'm not taking nearly as many hits as he is. And I just did at the end of that, but it's barely as much as he did beforehand, especially considering he's the melee between the two of us. I actually have an advantage where I can attack him as he's running away, whereas he can't do the same thing the other way around. And so because of that, here in a second, he keeps coming back over. He wants to try to block this again. I get another right click on him. I shoot him with Shadow Poison, and I see him coming over towards my Luna, thinking he might try to block her in so that Viper can do some damage with his little Nether Toxin, which you see him put there. The Earthshaker is trying to position himself right here, I believe, trying to figure out how to wall her in on top of that, but then I see it, and then right here I shoot him with that. He walls up in a second to try to save himself, but it doesn't matter because I have the ability to see him. Despite that, my Luna gets the kill, and then this guy overextends because he thinks that he can kill one of us, but that is not the case because I have Fairy Fires, right? And so I can shoot him on top of that to get a double kill. And so, to bring it back to the same point, I literally left the lane for less than maybe a minute, and in this particular case, here, I'll bring it on free camera, my Luna is now level 4, right? And she's the most farmed in the game, even with me leaving the lane. So you can set up for ganks, you can do all this crazy stuff, even when you just show up after you've been doing the stacking. So there can't be, I mean, I think that people might complain because they're like, oh, well, I'm not getting nearly enough experience and I can't help out my core or anything like that because I'm leaving the lane temporarily. It doesn't matter. It genuinely does not matter because you're going to get that money back later when people start farming your camps, right? And then on top of this, the only way we were able to get this kill is because Luna was level 3 at the time, and she has Lucent Beam, which is double the damage of the level 1, right? Whereas if I was over here, she would still be level 2 instead. So because of that, she got the benefit of having 2 levels with this thing. And then whereas my abilities, I mean, they scale, right? But they don't scale nearly as hard as Luna's would, especially considering she's a core. And so since I came back over this way, we were actually able to get a kill on them because they overextended, thinking that they could kill the Luna, but they can't because she's a higher level and she has the ability to spam her stuff to kill them, right? And I can just run them down with this stuff because overall, it actually doesn't take that much mana for me to be able to do this stuff because when I'm doing these stacks, especially if it's a low level like level 1, and I don't know what I would say about leveling Shadow Poison as opposed to these other ones because it depends on the player who's playing them and what their preference is and who they're playing with. So I would never say, oh, you should always max this one or this one or this one, right? I think that it depends on the game. But advantages of this particular case for Shadow Demon is you can stack these camps with low levels, and you actually have, it only requires 35 mana to use these, right? And I'm doing it 4 separate times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then my mana regen, I mean, you can bring some clarities if you want to, but honestly, I mean, you have enough mana to be able to spam this stuff relatively, without worry. And so bring yourself some clarities. I mean, that would be my recommendation. If anybody else thinks about this in the future, you can change up your itemization. But by this point in the time, my Luna is already ahead, and you can see that this laning stage has gone pretty well. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it as far as safe lane Shadow Demon for the Dire side. I think that this might be a much more viable way for people to do well in higher or lower MMR pubs, because it does not require you to micro anything. So I think it's relatively easy. You just have to get the timings down right. You don't need boots, and yeah, I mean, it should be a lot simpler. And then again, to reiterate, I will be making a video in the future talking about all the other camps and stacking times and stuff like that. And I think that the thing that I'll mention before I head out is that I think that Shadow Daemon, as far as supports go that are stacking God heroes, is you should almost always be paying attention to the time at the top of the game. That's just, think about this character, and when you look at him, you want to see a gigantic clock on top of his head, and that's how you abuse this character. Despite the fact that this hero has low win rates and a lot of different MMRs, or like the different ranked medals, it is a good hero if utilized under the correct person and the correct timings and all this stuff, right? Because no one else can stack like this hero. I know that other people mention things about Coddle and Venge and all these other heroes that can do triple stacks relatively easy. And if you guys do want to see those in the future, I can show you a bunch of stacking videos, because these are the things that I actually enjoy the most, because I think that it's a pretty neat way to be able to affect the outcome of the game based on playing a position 5, which is pretty crazy, because as most people would know, especially at a lower MMR, it's very hard to be able to rank up in MMR if your cores are kind of not, I wouldn't say bad, but they're just like not as game savvy. And so they might overextend or something like that. But the thing is, if you're doing this stacking, you're going to get your cores real big to where if they do make mistakes, it does not matter, because they'll have enough money to like protect themselves. So because they'll have the advantage overall, where you can already see how this is going by comparison. And so, yeah, I think that anyone, regardless of your MMR, should try to abuse this. I think it's really good. And yeah, if you guys would like to see some stacking videos in the future, let me know, and I'll try to post those when I can. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to, or add any comments, and I'll be sure to answer your questions if you have any questions about this kind of stuff. And yeah, let me know what you want to see in the future. Okay, thanks. Bye, guys.